Our next guests are known for their leadership and dedication to the land. Norma Kassi has been recognized for her extraordinary contribution to the preservation and protection of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, along with her work to establish the Arctic Institute for Community-Based Research and her role as a community and a territorial leader, both serving as chief of the Muntah in 2010, and then also as a member of the Legislative Assembly from 1989 to 1992, and so much more. Stanley Njootli, a respected elder, a former VGFN councillor from 1984 to 1988, a man of many hats, from his role of the Community Development Corporation to his important work and to support the preservation of the porcupine caribou herd, and also so much more. Here to reflect and reconnect with the land and the spirit of Together Today for Our Children Tomorrow is Norma Kassi and Stanley Njootli. So we'll begin with you, Norma. The 50th anniversary of Together Today for Our Children Tomorrow is finally here. How significant is this moment for you?
Oh my gosh, it's been absolutely a blast from the past in the last week. This whole week, just amazing, amazing things have taken place of bringing forth our history, and I just can't say how wonderful and proud I feel. Like the shows last night and the big drums of the stick gambling and all of that has taken place, and all the leaders coming forth and speaking, and this show that you do, it's just been phenomenal. I just it's amazing. What does it mean for me? Well, I started off, I just got to say that first of all, I was raised by my grandfather and my mother in Vantat, way up amongst the big lakes and our lakes in North Yukon, and we had lots and lots of animals. Like, holy smokes, the sky's just blackened with birds coming from the south in the springtime, and caribou just grunting all around me while I'm just a little kid, laying in the willows there, and just learning everything about our biodiversity and how precious it is, and all of that, and with that knowledge, and then at 6 years old, I was taken away to residential school, and then came back after a year and a half, and then just became a rebellious kind of teenager there for a bit. You called me your kind of rebellious.
Why are you so rebellious?
And that was long ago.
Yeah.
I'm a good elder.
It's all right. A lot of emotions are coming up this week. Yeah. Anyways, Norma, so it's all good.
So, and just, always keeping all of that knowledge in my head and my way and going forward. And then conservation of land, conservation of our caribou we got elected in 1985 and changed a 35-year regime of conservative government, and came in as the NDP government under Tony Pennicott, Margaret Commodore, and Danny Joe, Sam Johnson. Those were my incredible mentors during that time. And then not long after that, it was when Ronald Reagan in 1987 decided that they were going to open the calving grounds. So Minister Dave Porter, Renewable Resource Minister, called me into his office and he said, "I got to talk to you." And I was like, "Oh no, what's going on?" So I sat down. He said, "Ronald Reagan has decided to start looking at the possibility of opening oil drilling in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. And that I want you," he said, we didn't call it then, it was the calving grounds. He said, "Well, I want you to take a lead on this." And so I went, first thing that we do is go home, right? We go home to our village and sat down with my mom, and she told me, "You got to go to Crow Flats. She's got to fix me up, get ready for this." So we went to Crow Flats, stayed there for a couple months, came back, and then we had the big gathering in Arctic Village in Alaska. And it was there that our elders had an incredible strategy that they laid out. The environmentalists came in with an agenda and started to go up there to the head table. The elders stepped in, took their agenda and said, "This is our meeting. We will tell you guys how to do this." And the environmentalists helped us, but they were phenomenal later on in the campaign. They went to the side and let our elders counsel us for 4 days in the language, holding a stick and the talking stick. And it was very, very profound in terms of the strategy that they laid out for us. They told us, they all counseled up after the 4 days, and they came back from up in the hill where they stayed all day. We were wondering what they were going to say when they came back, and they laid out a strategy. They chose 8 of us from Northwest Territories and Alaska, and they said, this is a strategy. You're going to go home and make sure all your village is on your side and understand what you're going to do. From there, you go to the government of Northwest Territories and the government of Yukon, make sure they're on our side. They got to know everything about this caribou issue. And then from there, you go to the prime minister, your leader in your country, and you talk to them. And that's what we did. And it was really, I was very lucky and honored to have the seat in the Yukon Legislative Assembly at that time with all the leaders that I worked with. They were just so supportive and guiding me the whole way. And I was then able to go to the Prime Minister along with our leaders, knock on Paul Martin's door and say, hey, we're here, we need you. And he opened up the Canadian Embassy for us right there on the spot in Washington, D.C. From there, it was to Washington. And so we have all Canada on our back helping us. And they also told us that if anybody speak against you along the way, don't give them energy. Don't bother. Just keep on your track. And for the environmentalists, you walk beside them. They're going to work for you. They're going to help you. You walk beside them in good partnership. And also, but you speak about your rights to live and survive and our future of our caribou, why it's so important. They will speak about wilderness and the beauty of the land, Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. So we partnered up with that strategy, and from there we worked very, very hard. And in all of that, another strategy that was given to us was you train the youth all the way along. So we were to go back to our community every 2 years to report on all what we have done. And so the training of youth has become my really important thing, because I was trained by my elders and watched the Together Today for Our Children Tomorrow and oh my gosh, yeah. So just always guided by elders. And so as I got older, I made it my mission to just go out there and run around and get funds and fight for our youth and educate them and work with them. So we took 10 youth from the Western Seaboard in Seattle, Washington, all the way across to Washington, D.C., and we spoke all along the way. Edith Josie, Robert Bruce Jr., Alice Frost were our elder guides, and then we had the youth, and I think Annie, who's our MLA, was one of the young girls that were there. And yeah, we traveled across, and then we landed in Washington. This is a good story I got to tell. We landed in Washington, and we had no room. Like that big city, we just stayed in the little dingy motels all the way along, right? And we couldn't find any hotel room. Like our coordinator looked everywhere, and then we drove by this big fancy hotel, and I said, "Hey, check this one out." So we go in there, and the really fanciest hotel I've ever stayed in my life, and so we all went in there. We were so exhausted because we just rallied Philadelphia the night before, and we rallied them up and made a big downtown rally and carrying our signs and everything. And we were all exhausted when we got to Washington. So we go in that hotel, and they had rooms for us. They were like, I don't know. I don't even want to say how much those rooms were because we were just too tired. I just said, let's just get it. We'll raise the funds. We'll find some money. So we stayed there, and then next morning, I thought, I'm going to take advantage of this fancy place. So I go down to the room where, you people run and do exercise. What's that called? That room. So I go there, and I just running along, and I look around. All these black guys was in there, And then there's that young guy, his name was, he's on the Prince of Bel-Air.
Oh.
The little guy.
Carlton, yes.
Carlton, yes. He's like, I just keep looking at him and just looking at him. And finally he looked at me and I'm like, wow. And I just and then I just got out of there and I got shy. And I just thought, I'm going to have a really good coffee in this expensive place. So I went over there and I had a coffee and I'm sitting there and I'm looking around. Then all of a sudden, in this big door comes this entourage of black men. And in front was Will Smith. And it was, and I just thought, holy. And they sat down way over there somewhere. And I thought, okay, I'm going to wait till they have their coffee. And I just built up all this, I was so nervous. So anyways, they sat down, had their coffee, and I made my way over. And I said hello, and then I said, we traveled with some youth all across your country, and we're trying to fight and to protect our caribou. This is our main source of life, and we have some youth upstairs that would just love to meet you. And so I went to the phone. I said, you girls, come down, brush your teeth. Come down, and you guys come down here. Everybody come down. And they came down, and then I said, you guys look over there. And they just start screaming. I said, you guys don't do that. We're going to go over there and shake his hand. So they went over there, and that was the highlight of their life. He just took time to shake all their hands and take pictures, and it was amazing for them. That was the highlight of their biggest trip. And here it turns out, and then, of course, I grab him and I smell his neck. And anyways, it turns out we landed in Washington during the Black Man's March. And I took them to Abraham Lincoln Monument and through the whole state, the Washington monuments and the federal buildings and stuff like that, and show them where we go to talk to folks. And it was just black men, a sea of black men all over. Yeah, that was amazing, absolutely amazing time that I would never forget. And we were training the youth too, and it stayed with them for a long time. Yeah, I need to take a breath, but it was.
And the funny thing is that when they asked, they said they're going to have Norma and Stanley on the stage at the same time. Like, we have enough time for everybody. Anyways. How you doing, Stanley? That's all I got to ask. So, anyway, Stanley, I just want to, first and foremost, always thank you. You're always willing to share knowledge, always willing to share a story, and I really appreciate the fact that you've joined us, and especially when we want to develop, once again, the Elders Council at the Council of Yukon First Nations. You were very much, and even Buntat, not even being a member, as the Constitution speaks to, you volunteered yourself and your time to help the elders once again. And I just want to personally thank you in front of everyone for taking down the barriers that our people put amongst ourselves, and just be willing to do the hard work and the heavy lifting when needed. And I just want to thank you personally for that. So, sheesh.
Yeah. I want to thank you for that.
It's your turn now, my friend.
I want to thank you for that, Peter. And also I want to thank Judy. I was following her lead on that when we were putting the elders back into getting them back into the CYFN Constitution. The other part is that VGFN is part of the land claims agreement, the umbrella final agreement, whether a leader wants to be part of it or not. We're all part of it. We're all in the same boat together. Mm-hmm. So yeah. I want to acknowledge the elders that are sitting here today. And the leaders, the ones that went to Ottawa, Sam Johnson, and Percy was here earlier, and other elders that were here that went to Ottawa for the signing from 1973 to 2023. So 50 years is a long time, and I want to thank you for all the hard work and show you the respect for that and acknowledge you for doing all that work. And it'd be interesting to hear the perspective of those elders to talk about what that history was like and what it's like for them today. And to look at the history of the claims and what that means for today. What would it be like if we didn't have that today? Mm-hmm. And it took a lot of work and a lot of effort, like conservation, preservation are two simple words. But it takes a lot of work to put those concepts into action. A lot of hard work, like Norma was just describing, what it took to put conservation into its perspective, and it still continues. It never stops. You know, we're continuing to trying to protect the calving grounds in Alaska, and it just shows right there that we can basically, influence one of the most powerful nations in the world not to drill for oil in the area where they want to drill for oil, and protect the calving grounds for the porcupine caribou, so they can go there and calf every year. And right now, by the way, the numbers are doing really good. And by the way, that's one of the leading documents as to how we got our land claim settlement. Mm-hmm. And that was due to the strategic movement of Dave Joe and some of his advisors. They negotiated the PCMB agreement first, and that opened the door to basically start negotiating the final agreements. And that was, the agreement was signed, the Porcupine Caribou Management Agreement was signed 1984, October 26th in Old Crow. Mm-hmm. And then from there was appended to the individual final agreement. So Dave Joe negotiated that and got the First Nations together. And you know the history. Even the Indian Affairs were threatening to cut off basically the funding of the stipends that people were getting, like their daily honorarium, if you were having a meeting. And they did not want the First Nations to have a meeting, even to talk about the principle of conservation, the principle of preserving a herd, the principle of harvesting and sharing and have participation. So that's where it was at back in the day. And it took a lot of basically a lot of patience, a lot of wisdom of the leaders of the day, like Dave. It has to be said here. Mm-hmm. No Dave Joe, no land claims. And we'll take it.
Yes. We appreciate that.
So you gotta hand it to the man, that's. But there was a lot of support, and I'm sure, as modest and humble as he is, he will give that credit back to the elders that were involved. I can't speak for him either. So, nevertheless, I think that's where it all started. And in 1984, the agreements were basically coming to a halt because of the self-government agreement. We wanted to vote in favor of the agreements to ratify it. All the delegates were at the meeting, and it didn't move ahead because there was no self-government agreement. So from there, it took another few years to start negotiating what a self-government agreement would be, and a lot of strategy to get there. And on the other side of the table, they hired an independent negotiator, was Mike Whittington from Carleton University, a constitutional professor of law, to be able to negotiate with us from across the table from us. And that's how we basically, that was part of the strategy, to get someone that was independent to sit on the other side of the table to be able to reach the agreement that we have today. Mm-hmm. The 28 chapters in our agreement, the self-government agreement, the basically the implementation plan, and the fiscal transfer, which is ever-changing document, is the implementation. That's how First Nations implement their agreements. But getting back to the conservation and the preservation of wildlife and animals, and the lobby effort that was made on behalf of Old Crow, and we're still doing that to try to protect the calving grounds. It's going to continue for a long, long time. And what is the answer? The answer is that in the U.S. Congress and their legislation, if you get 100% of a Congress voting in favor to make it an all-time wilderness protection area, then that would happen. You would never get 100% Congress to vote in favor of it. What's the answer? Our continuation to lobby to protect the calving grounds. So it's got to be continuous. Mm-hmm. And to still ask for that status of all-time wilderness protection. And we continue that. And right now, the herd is around a little over 200,000, around that number. They're healthy. It's the only one of the healthiest herd left in Canada. And the result of that, we have done really well. And We've done well by the caribou, and we've learned a lot. And Shirley Adams had said herself, at one point in time, they're all caribou people, all the way from Old Crow all the way down to, the border, Yukon-Alaska border, and BC border. So they're all caribou people at one point in time. Now we're all like salmon people, and there's no more salmon left. So what the heck do we do? So there's discussions about that as to how we can preserve the salmon at this point in time, and the numbers are extremely low on the Chinook salmon and chum salmon. The runs are coming up are really low, and I sit on a salmon committee, and I wouldn't mind to have a young person from my First Nation to take my place and my seat on the salmon committee to start pushing basically the same agenda as to how do we look at preserving our salmon stocks. And it's a long drawn-out process. You're limited for funding. You're limited for mainly funding, like the acknowledgement and the push is there to basically preserve the salmon stocks, which is really dwindling, and the Yukon River system. So there's that effort. So if you're looking at the land claims agreement itself, it gives us the tools to be able to participate with government to look at how we can preserve the life that we have, and having the water protection, and there's without water, without fresh air, without all that, without that, all the elements, what do? We need to protect that. We're at that point in globally.
That's right.
We're basically to protect all those important elements of life, And one point I forgot to make: we're talking about history, we're talking about spirituality, we're talking about traditional knowledge in that area, and when we had our first gathering in 1988 in Arctic Village, there's a lot said about that. But the elders told us at that time that there was like Archdeacon MacDonald and a few elders that went by, paddled with a canoe. They went by the calving grounds and they went over to Kaktovik to visit over there and preach the word of the Creator and of God. But they stopped and they said they prayed over that calving grounds. They did their ceremony. They had a prayer right there over the calving grounds, and that was back in the late 1800s. And that was said at Arctic Village in that gathering. So I just want to say, if you want to talk about traditional knowledge and that, it's there. We've been talking about traditional knowledge for a long time. And what does that really mean? And in some sense, to define what that is. I think in 1973, with the elders that were there to negotiate and take part and advise the leadership of the First Nations in the Yukon, they put forward all their traditional knowledge that they had, because they used that. They were raised up on the land with all that traditional knowledge that they had. They put that into effect to put that into a land claims agreement. So there it is. It's in the agreements itself. In the self-government agreement, in 28 chapters, the traditional knowledge is in there.
Yes.
There's conservation, there's preservation, there's participation with government, there's to be able to, all the building blocks of basically having a good life. We just got to make it happen. I know there's a lot of people out there, younger people are struggling and they need help. So it's not only up to the chiefs, it's up to the First Nation people in Yukon who are basically right now be able to look at how we can help our younger generation deal with all the issues and all the problems that they have in this ever-changing world, like the technological world that we have. So that's something that needs to get done. So that's just one of the comments I want to make. Like, we have most of us are sitting here are older, and I've been going to events for the last 6 years, and what I notice that generations of people are getting older and older at these events. And the participation of younger generations is only when they're performing that they're up there, and you don't see a lot of the younger generation coming to a lot of the events that are laid out by our central organization, by all the events, First Nation events that we're having in our cultural practice. We don't see a lot of the younger generation. So the question is, how do we bring them in? That's the next strategic thinking that needs to happen. How do we keep that alive? How do we keep them engaged? How do we keep them involved? And bring them out from underneath their couch, with their phone and everything, like hiding under a blanket, that everything, with their phone. So I think that's a move that we need to make and look at that. I think with younger generation, we can't basically. They have a lot of issues. We need to deal with them, and I think it has to be done collectively, and it's got to start somewhere, and it has to be the unity of the people in Yukon to do it. Mm-hmm. We do have basically the constitutional agreement that we talk about, to be able to help us with that. And I think each First Nation, we look at our First Nations and all people that have their certifications and credentials and journeymen and everything else, we're doing okay. But we just need to deal with that issue.
You talk about the younger generation quite a bit, Stanley, and when I go to Vantat, I see still a very strong connection to the land. Most of the young people that grow up in Vantat learn to drive a boat or a quad before they even get a driver's license. What has been the momentum, especially from your leaders and your elders of the past, to remain with that strong connection to the land?
I think it's the elders there that are teaching the younger generation, the parents, are not only teaching, they're basically helping the younger generation that buy them their skidoos and everything, and help them out that way and buy their equipment for them and help them with that. And some of them do buy their own equipment, like, and some of them buy their own skidoos, and they're always out doing something. Mm-hmm. They're hauling firewood, they're hunting, they're out fishing. And one little story, there's the law can't keep up with them up there, the youth in Old Crow when they're going out hunting. This one little boy is driving by my house on a skidoo, and in May, month of May, he's going by a skidoo, and he's got a shotgun standing there on the skidoo. The shotgun was taller than him, going out geese hunting. So it's there, they're the kids are out practicing, and it's a struggle. Mm-hmm. It's still a struggle, but they're getting out there. They like hunting. They just like getting out on the land, doing stuff. They get out camping sometimes,
Yeah.
And they're taught by their parents and by the elders just to do that. Yeah, and they get help with it.
For sure. Norma, you talked about the significance of what Crow Flat means to you as an individual. How does it make you feel just to see that, the climate change obviously impacting those lands and the sacredness of what it meant to you and the evolution since your mother's time, your grandparents' time? What does it mean to you to see where it's going now, just based on globalization, if you will?
Yeah, that's a very good question. That's pretty much affecting us all over the planet. And we watched it in Old Crow Flats, one of the first places that started to change. And we have great big lakes that are all interconnected in Vantat. And those big lakes are beginning to drain out because of the permafrost melt that's happening so fast. And not only that, some of the water is sinking in some places throughout the wetlands. And then they just pour out into the river, and the river, Porcupine River, is just full of ice and in the springtime, and we've never seen anything like that, like really high water and just pour down the Porcupine River and down the Crow River. And then when we work on the international stage, we work with the Indigenous peoples in the Pacific Islands. And that water that's coming from our land goes all the way down to the Pacific Ocean. And there are brothers and sisters in the southern part of the Pacific Ocean are drowning right there. Water's receding, and they're having, as we all know, that's happening. So I just want to get back to the education of our youth. Mm-hmm. The reason I shared that story earlier, because that was the beginning of getting the support from very profound actors and actresses in the United States to assist us with the caribou issue. Our biggest goal during that time was to get as much support in the United States as we possibly can. And when I left I did it for 22 years, and Lorraine and Darius and other young people came in and took the issue on. And we built a tremendous support in the United States, and that's really important. And now I'm with there's Jared Gannett and a few of us are getting together. We want to now train the young people to on the salmon issue to do the same thing, to become advocates and teach them how to learn everything about here and then take them down to British Columbia. Look at all the salmon, where it comes from. Take them to Alaska, to the high seas, and check out the high seas fishing. Look at it. Have a really good look at it. Learn it. Go up the Yukon River. Talk to people. We want to train youth to do that. We're just talking about that now. So we're going to find the funds somewhere, and from there we're going to take them down, hopefully to Washington D.C. to start talking, start speaking out about that. Yeah.
And Stanley, we are, as leadership, we're still challenged by what do we deal with the salmon. From your perspective, what are some of the things that we can do strategically? And as Norma mentioned, lobbying, being very strategic in your process and how you deliver. What is some of your thoughts in regards to how we can not only maintain but also regain, if you will, some of our, that livelihood that we once shared?
The salmon run that I was there before, and all the fishing that took place along the Yukon River, everyone have their story about that, but that type of fishing probably will never happen again. But I want to make a comment on the environment. On February 4th, I went out to Crow Flats. It's, where it begins is about 35 miles. I took my niece and my nephew with me, and they're younger than me. I punched out a trail for them with my skidoo. So, yeah. And then I got a couple of caribou. And then when you got over that mountain, they call King Edward Mountain, you look over the Crow Flats. That's changing. The environment is really changing before your eyes. All the trees from there north, you look at them, they're just white. You can't tell a tree between whether it's a dead tree or a live tree. It's just covered with snow, the whole thing. The whole Crow Flat is just, all the trees, every tree is covered with snow. That's from the moisture. All the years, hundreds of years that the elder's been there, that never happened before. And it's been happening in the last 10 years, and it's more so. It's been there every winter for the last 10 years. It's just covered with snow, all those trees. And that's a change. That's a really dramatic change in that Crow Flat area. And so if you're going out there and you want to camp and you want to cut some trees down, for firewood or for setting up a tent, it's complicated. It's difficult to do because they're all covered with snow and it's just from the moisture. So that's a change right there. We have an elder living in Old Crow. He's looking over the river. He's got a big window there that looks over the river, and what he says is, I see it right there. The environment is changing before my eyes. Every season, you see every change. It's just changing right there. He's got story for every little change on every day, every event. The changes that are dramatic with the climate change is just happening right there before our eyes. But we had a meeting a couple of weeks ago on hatchery and on incubation in Yukon with the Salmon Committee, Department of Fisheries and Oceans, and some of the leaders. We talked about and researchers and the scientists to talk about what are the possibilities of doing it. At what stage do we kick in that change? Do we wait till it's too late, when there's no more salmon? Or do we do it when there's still salmon coming in that you can use to have a hatchery incubation? And basically, what would that mean? Would that mean a weaker or inferior stock of fish that'll be migrating up and down the river? Or do we find a way to preserve the existing stocks that we have and bring it back and basically continue the wild salmon? But this is an international resource that goes out in the ocean. So this is an international issue that has to be dealt with on the international scale, not only in the Yukon. But the agreements that Salmon Committee only speaks to the headwaters of the Yukon and the mouth of the Yukon through our agreements. From there, it's another entity that has to deal with from the mouth of Yukon on it because of the international waters. So the out in the Bering Sea, where the salmon have their 4 years and 5 years out in the ocean before they come back up up the Yukon River. So that area has to be dealt with to some degree. There's a lot of researchers out there, there's a lot of scientists out there, but basically, and fishermen, a lot of fishermen out there. So how do we preserve the Yukon stocks of Chinook that comes up the river? And what do we actually do at our end? We get the habitat. We have the habitat. It's well preserved. Most of the habitat, the spawning grounds. And how do we continue to basically preserve that? And we do have a booth over there next door, the SAM subcommittee, as to how the committee continues to deal with this. And we're basically just doing our best with the limited funds that we have at this point.
No, I appreciate that. Norma, a lot of your career has been about research and the importance of traditional knowledge. What was the significance about setting a standard when people come to our traditional territory to do, the research? How important was it for you to not only set OCAP as an example, but at the highest level so people knew the bar that they had to adhere to, if you will?
Well, that also goes back to the time several years ago now where there was a study done in the Arctic with Indigenous women where the levels of contamination and PCBs and things like that were found in the breast milk of our Indigenous women. And I was working with the Council of Yukon First Nations then, and the leaders at the time told us to start talking with the elders and get the elders together. And the elders advised us that we need to immediately, because news had gone out that there was this happening without real discussions with us. And Council of Yukon First Nations at the time encouraged us. I was the environmental coordinator. So they encouraged us to join up with the national Native organizations in Canada. So we did that with the Inuit, the Métis, and Indigenous peoples. And we all met in Ottawa and got together, and we met with Dr. Harriet Kuhnlein, who is a researcher in food security with Indigenous peoples around the world. We met with her, and we wanted to create a lab. We wanted to get our own research done. That we wanted to find out, the elders told us we want to find out what's in our caribou and fish and moose right now. That people were worried over that incident. Because, Dr. Harriet Kuhnlein and us and NAOs got together, created a board, got organized. We created a lab on the homelands of Ganawage in part of the McGill University. And we created a lab there. And then we got, elders told us, go get some moose, caribou, every place. We went all over Yukon, and I got at least, 300-400 samples of plants and edible things that Yukon First Nations had. We hauled it all down to CINE, Center for Indigenous Nutrition and Environmental Health, and we decided that, we gave it to the scientists there to analyze them. And at the time before that, they were coming to our country in Yukon, presenting with all these graphs of these levels of contamination, and it scared us, right? We were really worried about it. So the elders told us to do this. So when we get down there, we wanted the scientists to look at the risks and the benefits of our moose, caribou, fish, salmon, plants, berries, everything that we took there. And it turns out that the PCBs and toxaphene were very minute levels at that time. Like it was a dot in a whole fish, that kind of thing. And so that kind of knowledge, we took control immediately. And the Assembly of First Nations then got some of us together, and we started talking. We wanted to control research that's done on our people. And then I think it was Grand Chief Shirley Adamson at that time. We stopped the biotesting of our people. We needed to take control of that, and so we did that. And then the discussions of ownership and control, access and possession of our knowledge was then to be controlled more by our people in this country. And so we now have the OCAP principles. The OCAP principles, and I've done research, and I've joined with research, big research initiatives in Canada, and we got some substantial amount of money. but I was there to make sure that there was Indigenous-led research, that our people have access for the first time in history to ever access dollars from the National Centre of Excellence and also from whoever, Government of Canada, that it's now time for us to do our own research. So we've done that in Canada, which is really awesome, and based on these OCAP principles. So the Indigenous Peoples is over 600 First Nations in Canada, including Yukon, have now taken the OCAP principles and created their own principles around how research is to be done in their country.
That's great.
With respect to where we're at now, I think for me as an elder and everything that I've learned from my homelands and the devastation of our biodiversity loss, like there's a tremendous biodiversity loss all over the world. There's also, climatic changes that's just, it's pretty much out of control. And we have this future that we have to deal with and educate our youth about and to give them the resiliency they need. So I think for elders, as myself, I don't mind at all to sit down with any youth of any race, to sit down with them and let them know our knowledge from that perspective, to protect biodiversity, to speak out about it, to learn about it and go forward. With respect to our medicines and things like that, we have to hold dear to our ways. We, even that, they're all out there already. And our knowledge is absolutely phenomenal in going forward to protect our planet and to contribute, because the world has now, the United Nations and the world has now called upon us as Indigenous peoples to take the lead now. They're saying that loud and clear at the COP meeting in Montreal. While I was in treatment, I missed that one. So out of that, in Montreal, there was huge international voices around the world calling for Indigenous peoples to lead, which is also, I won the Arctic Inspiration Prize a couple of years ago with my team, and we won $500,000. With that money, we're doing youth training. And so we bring in non-Indigenous youth who are living here in this country. Some of them were international as well into that training. And we train them everything about our ways, like our leaders and what we went through with residential school and reconciliation. What does that mean? We teach them about our biodiversity. We teach them about science and how we want to monitor ourselves. You need to learn how, and without messing up with our animals too much anymore. There's just too many scientists coming into our country, like doing a lot of this testing of our animals and all the time. So we need to take control of that. And Indigenous peoples across Canada, the land guardians, are now looking at they're monitoring more, and they want some scientific monitoring. But how they monitor is by taste, smell, listen, hear, feel, and if they see bad water or something like that. And the Indigenous ways need to come forward in working with science. And then training our youth is very, very important. We just finished one in Kluane, and we trained them, and they're now out there. Some of the university students that were there changed their ways of thinking, and they changed their ways of how to do science within our countries now. So, I mean, and we're going to do another youth training in Nunatsiavut in August. We're moving it over there this coming August, and we're bringing Yukon First Nations as well as First Nations from Northwest Territories and over there in Nunatsiavut. So we keep battling for funds to do that and do that kind of work, and it's amazing. It's life-changing for them.
Yes.
And I think that's where we're going. And Together Today for Our Children Tomorrow has done tremendous work. I mean, I just look at my leaders here, holy Judy and Margaret, Sam, just amazing. Chuck, always guiding us in our work and helping us do this work. And yeah, and as leaders, I just want to tell the young people out there, come in, speak out, get trained, step up, use your voice, but don't do like some of us did. don't leave your children behind too long, but take care of yourself. Because I did this for 38 years, running by other people's agenda, and it really, like I was almost spinning. And then I lost my son, and I was like, boom, I couldn't do it anymore. I just like had it. So I went to treatment. I took 50 days in treatment. And I really recommend it for our young people to do that. Learn about addictions.
No, and I appreciate you opening up with that, Norma, as well. So if you're just tuning into Shona FM or to Facebook Live, we are at the 50th anniversary of Together Today for our Children Tomorrow speaker series, and we have Norma Kassi along with, oh my God, I forgot your name here. I was like, anyway, sorry, Stanley Njootli. I haven't talked to you for so long, buddy, at all. Anyways, all jokes aside. We witnessed pictures of Vantat early negotiations, and basically there's a coffee pot in the middle of the room. Today we have to entice people to come with food and honoraria and gift cards to give away. What was it like in the early 70s when, if people were starting to amalgamate and come together and start talking about our future and what it could look like through a land claim? What, from your perspective, what was it like in downtown Vantat?
Oh, we sat around a brew pot.
And we'll talk to James Allen about that in a couple of days too, as well. So,
The truth be known, yeah. So, but it was the elders that were really traditional at that time that really guided the community in Old Crow, And yet you want to do something, you had to work for everything. You wanted to keep warm, you had to haul firewood.
yes.
And you had to have a skidoo or you have a dog team to haul the firewood to keep warm. And if you wanted to have a good winter, you had to start harvesting for the winter in August for your firewood. Started getting, picking all the berries and that kind of stuff, and started harvesting fish and caribou for the winter. You had to start early in August. So that's what the elders said historically, And sometimes you did it as teamwork. Without teamwork, without collectiveness and working together as a First Nation, even throughout history, the stories, when that's passed down, you had to work collectively together to progress. They've up in Old Crow, north of Old Crow, there's 5 or 6 caribou fences. They're all named after all the people that built them, and they didn't name any landmarks after people. Our people didn't do that historically. The areas was just named after the areas, and but they named the caribou fences after people that were the headman for those caribou fences. So they worked those caribou fences in August and September and get enough food for the winter. So historically, that was part of our history. And we do have a lot of stories in Old Crow like that's been recorded. It has a lot of value. And for the younger generation, for them, why should we ask them to do anything with land claims documents today? Why should we? They're going to ask that question. Why should they? Mm-hmm. It's the value. If you can teach them the value, and you have to teach that to them, understand the value of who they are and how they're going to progress. And each First Nation have all their values to teach your young people. And it's there. It hasn't been lost. Residential school has taken a lot of that away, but to gain that back, and it's there. And the elders that are available today, are teaching that, and you can hear them through the heart and soul. That the value of the history is important. Once the younger generation know that value is there, like what's important to them and why they should progress and live a good life to move forward and have a better life. Oh. I think that's where that's what we were taught back in the early days is to do that. But we were too young and crazy at that point in time to follow those directions.
Sometimes it's all right to be crazy.
Stumble. We had to make it fall. Stumble a few times before we learned. Yeah.
For sure. And just to wrap things up, a question for both of you. Norma, you mentioned everybody from Will Smith to people such as, your colleagues, Margaret Commodore and others. can you name a moment or a person that maybe really motivated you to take a leadership role in your life, throughout your life? Or many people, you could name many people, but it's just, if there's someone that really inspired you to become who you are today, as not only as an elder, but also still giving back after all these years.
I was very young when my grandfather was still with us. He passed when I was like 12. And he packed me on the trails. And I always wonder about that little transistor radio on the top of like how come it talks and what's going on with it, right? And I got curious and I climb up there and try and take it down, and I was going to look inside. Thought there's little people in there talking or something. And I tried it. I was going to take it apart, and my grandfather came in and he said, I listened to news. I listened to news from all over on that thing. I want to know what's going on out there in the world. In Kuchin, he said that. And then he said, don't bother it. Don't bother that radio. And he said, someday you're going to talk in that radio. I think that's where it kind of sparked that in me, that I would do this work in the future. I learned a lot from the Tlingit people, your father, the Tlingit people. I lived with the Tlingit people for a long time. And I have a lot of respect for watching they're bringing their whole way of life forward, and with that strength that they've done it. And so I and all our leaders I learned from, like my own people. There's a lot of leaders, all the ones who took that document to get together today for our children tomorrow. It's like after that movement and this whole Yansi, we've been talking about that for a long time too. That became a strong organization as well. And then it started to, what I saw as a young girl was that it started to split us. And then one day there was a big meeting. I think it was over in near Carcross. I think Shirley talked about it today. And Elijah Smith got up there and this booming voice, and he said, today, from now on, we're going to be one. We're going to be one people. We're going to head together and we're going to walk together to go with the government. And that's the kind of leadership that I look for and sought out. And I just went, whew, and I even cried because it was getting tense amongst us. And we moved forward. And yeah, lots of leaders in this room, like, and I want to commend you too, Grand Chief, for what you do. All that you do, and open up the Council of Yukon First Nations for health and wellness, and all of that has changed this territory and Indigenous peoples in this town, and worked a lot, long and hard. And sure, we're having lots of challenges, and I know we're going to take control of that too. We need to build our own Indigenous land-based treatment center, like as soon as we possibly can, not worry about other people.
Yeah. And
then, and just do that. And lots of people guide me every single day. And I wish that I'm doing that for other young people going forward too. And I just want to say thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much for those kind words. And just to let you know, we met with Minister Patty Haydu, who is the Indigenous Services Canada, and we did put out the request for a land-based healing center, as we referred to. So just to let you know that, and appreciate your kind words. Stanley, just in regards to someone, maybe an inspirational leader or a person in your life or a moment in your life that inspired you not only to take a leadership role, but you're continuing on today, my friend. And is there anybody out there that you'd like to give, pay homage to, if you will, or a moment in our time?
In the past or present or?
Either or. Okay. People, are you still being inspired today, my friend? That's all that matters,
definitely.
Right?
Most definitely, yeah. It was Kenneth Newcomb. We call him My Goodness Me. He had polio on the left-hand side when he was a young man. So he went to Edmonton. He came back to Old Crow, and then he was basically he was handicapped on one side. He couldn't use his left arm and his leg. He used it. He can walk and everything. And he lived in 20 miles above Old Crow. He got married, 6 kids. He raised a family from the bush with living traditional lifestyle, cultural traditional lifestyle, like from 80 above to 60 below. And he raised a family from out in the bush. He raised his family with that handicap. And that's, if you like, so every time I have an ache or pain or like a situation I got to deal with, I think of that, what that man had to go through. So I got inspired by how that man, raised his family from the wilderness and from the bush. And he had a lot to say. Like we used to go to his camp. Sometimes he had camp a mile above Old Crow when we were kids, like 10, 12 years old. We used to go haul firewood, and he'd tell us stories. He tells one story there about, you want to talk about, is there anything like any belief or anything that First Nations know about, he tell us, that was back in the late 60s. All his kids there, they still remembered him. His son remembered Esau Schaefer, Randall Telici, those boys. They're my age group. They remember what he said. I'm just saying this for witness to say that this is what he told us. He said eventually, he said, the old people told him from way back. We're sitting there in the 60s. He told the old people told him from way back. He said, told them, the younger guy said, eventually money going to come into you. And he's sitting there and he's telling us, how money going to come into us? Come into your house. How's that going to happen? Like, how can money come into your house? That's what those old people told us, He said, sometimes we look at them and we wonder if they're, they're okay, And then here we are today. You can do your e-transfer now. So that's basically, there it is, And that came, those thoughts or whatever came from people back in historically.
Oh.
So, and there's a lot of that we have from our First Nation. I talk to Percy Henry a lot. Him and I speak the same language. We go through a lot of history, a lot of stories, and we talk about the first contact when all the shaman were still alive, and what all they knew, and how they've seen that change coming with Archdeacon Robert MacDonald coming into our country to convert people to Christianity. So we talked about that a lot and how that happened, how that took place. So with Percy, and we talk about it in our language, One day he knew I was going to come over, so he got his microphone out and he said, there, he can't hear. So he's got that big microphone sitting on the table, and I walk in here, he's waiting for me. He talked to me for about 2 hours. I just sit there and listen, and took in all his stories, and I asked him questions, and asked him some real complicated questions. I just wanted to see what he knew. And he have answers. He knew some of those answers. So historically, like history-wise, and I asked him about Robert MacDonald. I know John Tisha paddled him from Old Crow with a canoe all the way to Dawson with a canoe. Robert MacDonald. You can imagine going down 300 miles and coming up the river 300 miles. If you've ever been canoe paddling, you know what that's like. That's tough. So when they got to Dawson, he's seen that gold there, Robert MacDonald. And the way I know about it is John Ross Tisha, when we were kids, he used to tell us stories about it. That's a man helped raise me up. He talked about it. His grandfather, and that's what Archdeacon told him. That's gold, and they seen it back then. That was in 1878 when that happened. So we heard it a few times through a story through John Ross Tisha, and I asked Percy about that story. And he knew about it already, I thought he didn't know. He knew about that, yeah. He said, there's probably historical documents, probably in Winnipeg, where Robert MacDonald wrote to the Queen about what he's seen in Dawson. And he wanted the Queen to, basically do something about that. But about that gold that he's seen there in Dawson in 1878. So there's documentation of that. One more thing.
One more thing. Closing comment. There you go.
Okay, so history, history-wise, we can always talk about the future, but historical-wise, I said this before a number of times this session. Dick Harrington came to Old Crow in 1964, 65, and he's a paleontologist. He wanted to know about prehistoric animals. Our tradition, culture at that time is that you take them, all of the elders knew the story, but they took him to the oldest elder. That's just respect. And she told him stories about all the prehistoric animals through the translator. She couldn't speak English, Elijah Steamboat. She couldn't speak English, so she told the stories. And then 5 hours later, and 1 gallon of tea, after they drank about a gallon of tea, sitting there 5 hours later, he asked the question, well, where could I find one? Where could I find a prehistoric animal? So she said, there's this creek called the Gunjik. The people are going by there on that hill, in that river bend there. She had a name for it. We don't remember that name, but she had a name for it. It fell into that creek there, that animal. So back in them days, the people were, when an animal died on its own, they just left it, just out of, they don't know what happened to it, so they just leave it. And she said, there's one that fell in the creek there, and it died there, in that creek. When they went by, the group, the First Nation was going by that creek, and the one creek, and that's, so Pete Lord, he took Dick Harrington up to that creek, and they went to that river bend where that animal died. They went there, and they started digging around in there. In the mutt there, they found that the mastodon skull, which is sitting there. And they took that into, they cleaned it up. They took it in their boat, brought it down. It's somewhere in the warehouse in Ottawa, Toronto. They had carbon dating on it. It's 20,000 year old. That's 20,000 year old. What does that tell you? Our story go back. That's a 20,000 year old story that can be verified by an academic and some traditional people. So it's just a point I want to make in terms of is there history? Yeah, there's history. It's definite and it's confirmed.
Well, I appreciate both your stories today. We are still making history there, and I just want to thank Norman along with Stanley for your time today. And we have a little token of our appreciation for you today. But a big round of applause for Norma and Stanley.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you very much for having us up there.